So the act of wine tasting has been shown to engage more of the brain than playing an instrument or playing a sport. It's this truly kind of cognitive, multi-sensory activity where the brain constructs our experience of a wine from a myriad of different sensory stimuli, and all of that is then modulated by the pleasure centres and the reward centres in our brain, and before we arrive at that final conscious experience of a wine. But this is how even wine experts have been fooled when it comes to price points, for example, when they've been primed with the wrong information, or how experts even will attribute red food characters to a white wine when it's been coloured red. It all comes down to this fascinating way the brain constructs our perceptual reality. Actually, reality is not as objective as we sometimes assume that it is. And this is obviously fascinating for us as brand owners and marketers. So tonight we're exploring some of those ideas, taking a little journey through our senses and trying to discover a little bit about what each one can reveal to us. Daniel Kahneman showed us in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, how we have these two modes of thinking. System 1, which is fast, automatic, emotional, autopilot, and system 2, which is slow, effortful, conscious, rational. But what's interesting is that actually we now understand that up to 95% of the time we're thinking with our system 1 mind. And what's even more interesting is the extent to which system 1 is visually driven. So the visual sense, therefore, is so much more than just aesthetics. In fact, it's really one of the most important ways in which we interpret and deconstruct the world. So here we're exploring how differently we perceive these three wines when we're not primed by what we see. Smell is the one sense that connects directly into the limbic system. That's the part of the brain involved in emotion and memory. So through this aroma smelling game, we can really bring that to life and understand just how powerful that is, remembering it's the same mechanism at work when we engage in emotional storytelling. Do we all experience the world in the same way? Well, this really shows us how, not just from a cognitive perspective, but actually physiologically, how our sensory physiology can vary hugely, resulting in these wildly different subjective experiences. Thin slicing. Thin slicing is the ability of the unconscious mind to extrapolate huge amounts of information from the tiniest details, these thin slices of experience. This idea the devil's kind of really in the details. Professor Charles Spence shows us with this amazing experiment that we can actually tell the difference between champagne, cava and sparkling water just by the sound that it makes. So the premise that abstract concepts might have visual properties is obviously interesting from the perspective of brand naming and building visual identities. And the Kiki and Baba effect shows us that of these two nonsense words and completely nonsense shapes, actually 95% of people will agree which is Kiki and which is Baba. So here we're taking a sensory experience and applying this Kiki and Baba effect and seeing, do we know which of these two contrasting wines we're talking about if we express it merely in abstract shapes? No matter how instinctively we recognise an aroma, thanks to that power of the limbic system, actually naming them is so hard because it involves this completely different part of the brain. We have to build that pathway, that memory structure, by reinforcing the neural connection, just like learning a language, for example. So here our guests are having the opportunity to encode their scent memory with these 12 scents of Christmas and also learn about where to come across them in different wines. Have you ever had a wine on holiday and brought it home and it just does not taste the same? In a way, it's a wonder that this ever actually surprises us when you begin to understand the multimodality of our sensory experiences. Sometimes it's just not only about the product itself, it's about how that entire experience of that product and the entire story around it is created. That's of course what we must do as brand owners. And so here we're experimenting with a variety of multi-sensory pairings to bring this insight to life.